is this election, this red wave, this red election, is this the death of liberalism, even if liberals don't realize it yet?
I would say so.
It's definitely a repudiation of the status quo, the liberal establishment. Mm-hmm. And they definitely are the establishment. Just the people expressing rejection of that is a sign of life.
Exactly. Yeah. I completely agree with you. And I think to key in on that word life, because that's why I said that it represented the ossified remains of the ossified middle classes. And as more people become proletarianized, then that sort of polite decorum fall out the window because people have to worry about their material conditions. They need new language to articulate that. And that sort of middle class liberalism cannot articulate that stuff. So that's why it's essentially dead now. And I think also the fact that this podcast exists, that we personally exist, and we have the ideas that we do, shows that it's dead.
We were talking before about all these dead-end cable news networks and all this monotonous liberal discourse, woke liberal discourse. Mm-hmm. And it's partly desperation, but it's also like propaganda. It's based less on reason and more on repetition. They just repeat it over and over again, hoping that people will be like literally brainwashed because they get to define what reality is in big media. It's not working.
Yeah, it's not. Also, the American working class don't watch the television shows anymore that they used to. And I was speaking with a friend of mine about this the other day. And as a reference point, now this is going to make everyone laugh. But in the 90s, my mom, she would watch soap operas. And I was watching these old clips of General Hospital from the 90s, right? And I told a friend of mine how I was astonished by the level of acting and the level of narrative, and how compared to today, if you watch television or movies, there's so much noise. There isn't that sort of sense of a detailed story and fully developed characters. You have this kind of repetition of these kind of liberal propaganda archetypes. I think that movie studio A24 kind of represents that as well, where the A24 movie is essentially a millennial adult who is celebrated for being an autonomous identity. You know what I mean? Whereas a 90s General Hospital episode, you're seeing the whole community, you're seeing family, you're seeing kids, you're seeing marriages. I think that's the reason why people don't watch TV anymore, is because they're not seeing their lives reflected on TV. They're seeing these so-called hip, so-called posh, fully grown adults that are just repeating identity politics over and over and over and over. It's definitely died. I think a good example of this kind of propaganda was that movie A Wrinkle in Time that had Oprah in it and Reese Witherspoon. And if you watch, it's total teaching these like super duper woke identity culture values.
I think that the message got in front of the story. I remember I used to like Grey's Anatomy until it totally became about teaching people about pronouns and racial tensions. They decided that it was their goal to model appropriate behavior. I think have had it up to here with the language police and the comedy police and the queering of every boundary, and we have to decolonize everything. It just got so excessive. I wonder if this is what the end of liberalism looks like, this hyper woke PMC, hyper sanitized, holding space, just blah, that's so blah, but also so oppressive at the same time.
Tragedy and farce phenomenon that Marx talked about. I wrote a Substack like a year or so ago where I said that Black Lives Matter was the farcical version of the civil rights movement. I don't mean that the civil rights movement was a failure totally, but I mean that people were martyred fighting for it.
They didn't get real estate and Maybelline ads.
Yeah, and TV shows.
Invited to the Oscars. It's also, I'm going to piss off the feminists, but men can fall into this too, this kind of oppressive thinking about everybody's feelings, everybody being included, and to be kind, to be nice, to be this kind of this weird postmodern big brother or big sister that's just like, stop, just ugh.
Yeah, you're right.
And they're going to accuse me of being Jordan Peterson and saying this was too many childless women in the professions. And since they don't have kids at home, they have to turn everybody else into a child. Which Okay, there could be some of
There's
that.
something to that.
But what happened? Where did all this therapeutic culture, this how are you, and this oppressive inclusion,
I have to chime in. Okay, so the guy who wanted to talk with me after class today,
who asked if you were a fascist?
well, yeah, he asked if I was a fascist. So he was asking, why do you have a problem with men sharing their feelings, Anthony? I said exactly what Tara just said. It's enough with that. Enough with this big brother woke. Stop, bro. Like, stop. We were talking about this guy in the class. He has like the school shooter vibes. And so I was chilling with one of the anthro professors, and then another one of the professors came in, and he spontaneously mentioned the guy who her and I were talking about. And so I'm listening to the two professors, and then the male professor was all like, I just think we just need to share all of our feelings as men. And then I said, no, I think actually what's his problem is that he needs a woman. And it just went crickets. It just went crickets. And that's the problem with these types. They negate the common class culture of life, the commonalities of life. It's annoying. It's annoying.
Mega! When they make women female again and let men be men again.
Yes. He was like, I don't want to just watch a baseball game with my buddies. I want to talk about my feelings. That's exactly what he said.
Well, that would ruin the baseball game. There's a time and a place, man. Time and a place.
Yeah, that's the problem with woke, is that it comes from this upper crust class, but the actual culture that made up the nation is actually working class.
The culture can change, but it has to be like organic and consensed on. It can't just be like handed down from the academy, like directly via film critics and the cultural commentators
right
from their cultural studies courses, imposing it on everyone.
I don't know if there was too much of a glut of people coming out of graduate schools with these degrees, and they came out and they're like, oh my God, everything's so racist and sexist, and somehow the best thing they could do is try to model appropriate behavior. That got reduced down to language policing and woke scolding and virtue signaling and canceling. But the hall monitor thing is not a good look.